So if you followed my channel in the past, you probably noticed that most of my amps are more of the American sound than they are the British sound. You know, apart from one big exception, the Rift Ainsley Lister amp, all my other amps are blackface Fender style, Dumble style in the case of the TS1, or Tweed. And over time, I've tried, you know, a few different British style amps. I had a reissue Marshall JTM45, which I didn't really get on with. I don't think I had the right setup. It was a little bit stiff to me, although interestingly, I sold it and it's now been sold again and owned by Mick Taylor of TPS. You've probably seen it on there if you've watched some of their recent videos. So I then tried a Friedman Dirty Shirley, which I liked, but again, there was some sort of tightness or something I didn't get on with. I always listened to, you know, sort of early Marshall stuff and thought, that's what I want, that looser sound. You know, I use the word swampy quite a lot, and I feel like there's a Marshall amp for me that really fulfills that. And it's a mix between the British blues sound that I love from the mid to late 60s and the sort of American swampy sound that I try and get by using, you know, American amps with fuzz and overdrive. But, you know, in my mind, for example, the JTM45, you know, when Marshall took the Bassman and made this amp sort of related to that, I think it really did to that Fender style circuit what I want in an amp. So, when I saw that there was a course at Rift I could do one-on-one with Chris for 3 days, and would walk away with an amp under his tutelage. Now, it's not a Rift amp, I must say that. It's an amp you make with him there. It's not, you know, marketed as Rift. But of course, with his experience and everything he does, you get the input and the help from him to make an amp that I think feels, you know, if not as good as one he would produce himself, clearly, one that is better than I expected it to be. So I have to say, I wasn't expecting this amp to be quite so dynamic, in the sense that what you've heard on the Les Paul so far has been the same settings on the amp, just the volumes there, from completely clean to this on the edge of breakup, slightly fuzzy, broken-y sounding overdrive that I personally love. You know, no saturation to speak of, or extra sustain, you know, nothing in that modern sense. That's what I'm always looking for in the overdrive character of an amp. And I have to say, probably compared to my Fender type amps, the sound of the drive on here is just that bit more interesting. Oh! Drive on here is just that bit more interesting, I think. I mean, we can do some comparisons in other videos, but yeah, I'm really, really impressed. I think it's time to hear a Strat. have to say I wasn't expecting the cleans to be that sweet, and also, you know, they get really dynamic, you know, that touch responsiveness. The JTM45 I had from Marshall, which was not hand wired, was never that dynamic. Certainly not when I played it. But this one, it's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more interesting, and yeah, it's got a lot more of everything, including the bass. You have to be really careful with the bass. So that was the last of what I'd call the sort of clean settings. Even if I dug in, it stayed pretty snappy. Now I'm going to whack it up a little bit more and start using the bright channel as well a bit more. You'll hear there's a little hiss. Bright channels are louder, sort of noise. But yeah, it gets, in the room, this was loud. It gets louder. Okay, I'm going to turn it up one last time, and then I think it's really interesting. I always wondered why the Bluesbreaker pedals were called Bluesbreaker pedals. And obviously this amp, when it was in its combo and when Eric Clapton used it, it was called a Bluesbreaker amp. When I turn this up, I'm going to start to hear that similar sort of sound I hear from those pedals. So once I've done that, we should really see what happens if I put a Bluesbreaker pedal on top of a Bluesbreaker amp. We'll find out in a minute. Yeah, to be honest, at that highest volume, it was awesome. You know, really glorious to play with that Strat. But what surprised me is all the way through the volumes there, I got something out of it that was not sterile. There's never anything sterile, and it's got this sort of depth with the bass and the lower mids, and then it's also got this sort of clean brightness, glassiness, because although I'm plugged into the normal channel, I'm jumpered using the bright channel as well, and it gives that sort of glassiness. So that I think is fascinating. As it came to putting the Bluesbreaker pedal on top, I think it was too much Bluesbreaker, if you ask me. It just made everything more nasal and the compression changed and it just wasn't as good. So maybe a Bluesbreaker pedal plugged into something else gives you the Bluesbreaker character, but plugged into a Bluesbreaker, it's just, yeah, it doesn't work for me. Okay, I'm going to leave this video here rather than going through more and more guitars. As part of my no pedals required video, you'll see all sorts video series. You'll see all sorts of guitars plugged into this amp, and I'll do you know, you'll see it around the channel a lot. What I would say is, in terms of the building course, if you've never done any soldering, wiring, or anything to do with guitar wiring and things, I would go for the 2-day course where you build a tweed amp before you do the 3-day course. It was a bit of a push and a stretch, but the end product is fantastic. You feel really satisfied, you've made it yourself. So the 2 or 3-day courses are great at Rift. In regards to this particular amp, I'm very, very happy with it. And it's going to be something you see a lot of on the channel, I think, to pair up with my other Fender style amps. So overall, my mind about the JTM45 has changed because of this amp from the first Marshall one that I had, which is very lucky because if you watched my last video, I mentioned that I'm going to get a couple of new amps in, which I swapped a guitar for. Well, I've swapped my 1961 ES335 for a couple of old amps, one of which is a 1965 JTM45. Now, the swap hasn't been done yet. I'm waiting on something, so it could be even a few months away, but I'm just got to say I feel very relieved how much I love this amp, and I can't wait to hear what the original one sounded like. So yeah, let me know what you think of the sound of this amp, and as I said, you'll hear it in loads more videos. I may even do just a sort of part 2 to this in a few weeks if I've had a chance to play around with the wiring and reduce any noise. But otherwise, thanks for watching. See you next time.